I'd like to call this meeting of the Bedford County Board of Supervisors to order. Welcome you all here this evening. If you have a cell phone, if you would not mind to either turn that off or put it on vibrate, we would appreciate that. We will begin our meeting with a moment of silence. Thank you very much. Notice we have some veterans in the audience this evening. This is the time that we'll stand and do the Pledge of Allegiance, and I'd invite one of the veterans if you would lead us tonight. If you would be willing to do that, if you'd come forward.
Stand, place your right hand over your heart and salute. The veterans could keep their hats on, do a hand salute if you did choose. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. You may be seated. All right, that moves us to the approval of our agenda. There's one change from the consent agenda. We'll be removing item 6C, which is consideration of a resolution updating the personnel policy manual, and we will move that to our next regular meeting. Other than that, any other changes to our agenda for this evening? If none, I would entertain a motion.
Mr. Chair, I move we approve the agenda.
All right, I have a motion from Mr. Johnson. Is there a second?
Second.
Second from Mr. Sharp. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. That brings us to our citizen comment period. We have a public hearing this evening for the Smart Scale applications, so this is not the time to talk about that. And I think everybody that I have signed up is Smart Scale related. So if there is anyone that would like to speak on any other topic than the Smart Scale applications, now would be your time. You'd have 3 minutes. When we get to the public hearing, you'd have 3 minutes as well. We've got a clock on the wall to help you keep up with your time. Does anybody like to share anything this evening? Okay, if not, I'll close the citizen comment period and we'll move to the consent agenda. Mr. Hiss.
All right, Mr. Chair, there is now 3 items on the consent agenda. Item A is a resolution adopting the fiscal year 25 through fiscal year 30 secondary 6-year road plan on rural rustic road resolutions. And those are for the paving additions for throughout Bedford County. Item B is a resolution approving the application, submission, acceptance, and appropriation of the Virginia Department of Social Services Fatherhood Incentive Funds in the amount of $12,500. And item D is a resolution approving the submission, acceptance, and appropriation of the Virginia Opioid Abatement Authority and Virginia Department of Social Services Expanded Kinship Navigator Funds.
Okay, are there any questions regarding the consent agenda? If none, I would entertain a motion.
Mr. Chair, I'm just curious, what's the fatherhood incentive program?
Maybe if Mr. Crawford is here, maybe he can answer a little bit more of the specifics as to what the goal of that program is.
Good evening. It is a new initiative given to us.
Got to turn it on. Turn it on.
Oh, thank you. Look at that. It's a new pot of money that the state has just given us to come up with ways to either have an event or provide services for fathers who are trying to keep their children or regain custody of their children. Half the money is for services. The other half is to try to come up with an event here in the community that we're planning now if you all approve the funding.
Thank you.
Okay.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I make a motion to approve items A, B, and D of the consent agenda.
Okay, I have a motion for Mr. Scott. Is there a second?
Second.
Second from Mr. Davis. This is a roll call. Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Ms. Bansley?
Yes.
Mr. Sharp?
Yes.
Mr. Davis?
Yes.
Mr. Scott?
Yes.
Ms. Parker?
Yes.
Chair votes yes, motion passes. That brings us to the approval of the minutes from May 28th, 2024. Are there any corrections or amendments to those minutes? If not, we would entertain a motion.
Mr. Chair, I make a motion we approve the minutes as presented.
Okay, I have a motion for Mr. Scott. Is there a second?
Second.
Second for Mr. Johnson. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. Brings us to our public hearings and presentations. The first thing we have is the presentation of a resolution recognizing the Bedford Boys Tribute Center's 5th anniversary. Mr. Johnson.
If I could get Mr. Ken Parker and Linda to come up front. You want to be up here? No, you stand between us. You make us look better.
Okay.
This is a resolution recognizing the Bedford Boys Tribute Center's 5th anniversary. Whereas Bedford County recognizes founders Ken and Linda Parker of the Bedford Boys Tribute Center as it celebrates 5 years of successful operations in our community on June 1st, 2024. And whereas the Parkers have created a place to specifically honor the soldiers of Company A in the former Green's Drugstore, where the first telegrams of Bedford's D-Day casualties came on July 17th, 1944. And whereas the impact of the Tribute Center extends beyond Bedford, having hosted almost 15,000 visitors in its first 5 years of operation, representing all 50 states and more than 16 countries. And whereas the Tribute Center hosts numerous events to honor and educate, including special ceremonies, wreath layings, field trips, welcome home parades, and the pride and spirit of the Bedford Day, which is celebrated each July 17th. And whereas the Parkers produced the documentary We Have Casualties, which immortalizes the stories and sacrifices of the Bedford Boys and has received national and international media attention, preserving their memory for future generations. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Bedford County Board of Supervisors, that the board does hereby recognize the efforts of Ken and Linda Parker and the Bedford Boys Tribute Center as the nation's largest and most comprehensive museum exclusively dedicated to the furthering of the legacies of all 38 Bedford Boys who by their supreme sacrifice have taught us that freedom is not free. Thank you, Ken, Linda.
Oh, my. Thank you. Mr. Chairman, if I may take a moment of the board's time. There we are.
Okay.
You have humbled us, and we're foreigners from the state of Oklahoma, and I must say our move to Bedford was the best thing we've ever done. So we'd like to thank you. And we have for each of you a copy of our documentary. We have casualties, if you will. I don't know how many I gave you, Mickey, but make sure. And then also, not to be forgotten, the real brains of the outfit, huh?
Thanks, Ken. Appreciate it.
We're all set, young lady. Okay. All set, does everyone have one? Here's
Thank you, Ken.
Again, we are honored and humbled. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That moves us on to our next item, which is the public hearing regarding the Bedford County Smart Scale applications that will be presented by our county engineer, Eric Smedley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Another round of smart scale applications are upon us, and there are 4 projects under consideration in Bedford County. Before I get into those project specifics, I want to take a quick moment to provide an overview of the Smart Scale program. It's a state program led by VDOT and the Department of Rail and Public Transit. Smart Scale is currently in its 6th round of funding. Eligible projects include those which improve capacity and operation of roadways. Maintenance type projects are not eligible under Smart Scale. Eligible projects must also address at least one need identified in the state's transportation plan, known as V-Trans, needs such as safety, congestion, accessibility, things of that nature. So pre-applications were submitted back in March, which is a prerequisite for the full applications. From there, letters were mailed out to all adjacent property owners for these potential projects, and this public hearing was advertised. Bedford County may elect to submit up to 4 full applications, meaning any combination of the 4 projects discussed today can be carried forward to that full application. Projects are scored on a cost-benefit basis. Those scores are then ranked across the district, and ultimately that ranking is used to select which projects receive funding. Just a reminder, Smart Scale is entirely funded through state and federal dollars. No local Bedford County match is required for this program. So here are the list of projects under consideration. The first 3 projects include left turn lane concepts at the respective intersections. Route 22 at Fancy Farm and Centerville, Route 221 at Centerville and Timber Ridge Road, White House Road at Radford Church and Feldspar. And lastly, we have the Route 122 improvements at the lake. That project includes multiple components, and I will step through all of those here momentarily. But first, looking at the Route 122 turn lanes at the Fancy Farm Centerville intersection. I know it's really hard to see on this slide. Just to orient you, that is 122 running horizontally on the screen there, Liberty High School in the top right corner. This project is considering adding a left turn lane, left turn lanes on Route 122 at that intersection. To accommodate those left turn lanes, the roadway width is expanded there towards the Centerville direction. Driver behind this project is primarily safety. There's a high crash volume history at this location, so those left turn lanes will hopefully reduce the number of rear ends and angle crashes at this location. So hopefully that's a little bit easier to see. This is a close-up of that intersection. You can see the left turn lane concepts at that intersection, and then the darker shaded area depicts the pavement widening to allow for those left turn lanes towards Centerville. Moving on to Route 221 at Centerville and Timber Ridge Road, similar left turn lane concept here. Again, apologies for the small graphic on your screen. Again, safety is the reason behind this project. This location, as well as the previous location shown, are some of the actual highest volume crash locations for intersection types like this throughout the county. So again, installing left turn lanes to try and reduce the number of angle and collision crashes from vehicles navigating that intersection. Here's a close-up of that intersection, a little closer at least. Left turn lanes on 221, darker shaded area depicts the pavement expansion in the Timber Ridge Road direction there. Moving on to White House Road at Radford Church and Feldspar. Again, similar left turn lane concept. This location also has a pretty high crash history, which is compounded by the annual seasonal summer traffic volume increases that this location sees in summer. Left turn lane, there's a zoom in, left turn lanes on White House there, and pavement is expanding towards the Feldspar direction to accommodate that. Okay, moving on to Route 122 improvements at the lake. I will say I have two different concepts that I will present here tonight. The one shown here is the one that was included in the letters that were mailed out to impacted property owners. The drivers behind this project are really twofold. Again, safety. There's a high crash volume along this corridor, and also looking at access management improvements along the corridor for roads adjoining 122, all the businesses and homes along this corridor. So I will step through the project scope over the next couple of slides, starting here and moving away from the lake. Just to orient you, Halesford Bridge is just off the screen to the left there. So first we have a roundabout concept at Mills, Azalea, and Waterwheel. This roundabout is intended to enhance access for those adjoining roadways and the adjacent properties, but it also serves as a big traffic calming feature to reduce speeding along Route 122 while managing the traffic volumes that flow through there. Moving away from that roundabout, we have a center turn lane concept along the Route 122 corridor. Again, similar to the other left turn lane concepts, trying to mitigate crash risks along this corridor, as well as enhancing access to the adjoining parcels. There is one entrance consolidation on the strip between Vinnie's and the Red Rocks gas station. Those two entrances are proposed to consolidate into a single entrance, which is depicted on the right there of the screen. Continuing on, you see that second entrance called out to be consolidated. The center turn lane continues down Route 122 and ultimately terminates at Casey's Lakeview. From there, the roadway tapers back down to a 2-lane road. And at that point, we are calling out mumble strips on the shoulders of 122. So those mumble strips, they're similar to the rumble strips you've seen. We have them in other locations around the county, along 460, along other stretches of 122, among other areas. The effect is the same. The difference is the mumble strips are quieter than the rumble strips. So the intent there is try to mitigate noise nuisances that could potentially arise from those rumble strips there. Mumble strips continuing on around the curve of 122, also calling out some additional signage for that curve. There have been a series of roadway departures along this location, so these features are intended to help reduce those departures.
Is that like a politically correct term for accidents, people running off the road?
The technical term, I suppose. But yes, people running off the road there. Hopefully those rumble strips will correct them if they are drifting off the road or not paying attention, and those signs just provide an additional visual so that curve doesn't sneak up on people. Yep. So mumble strips continuing on past the Fraternal Order of Eagles here and ending at the project limits shown here on 122. All right, moving on to the second concept for this project location. This concept is identical to the first one, except that roundabout has been backed out at Mills, Azalea, and Waterwheel. So if the preference is to move forward without that roundabout, that center turn lane would be carried further towards the bridge, and everything else beyond that is the exact same that I just went through. So we have the center turn lane carrying down 122, transitioning back down, and then there's shoulder mumble strips through the balance of the project. So with that, here is a timeline for the Smart Scale process. Following this public hearing, there is a work session discussion scheduled at the June 24th board meeting. Final applications are due August 1st. From there, those applications are scored, and those scores are released in early 2025. The Commonwealth Transportation Board will officially select projects for funding at its June 2025 meeting. Then from there, fast forward to 2027, when that funding for those successful projects hits the books. At that point, VDOT will complete the full designs for these projects and progress them forward to construction. So with that, I'd be happy to take any questions.
Any questions for Eric?
Can I make a comment? My wife and I went through that area Saturday morning about 9:30 a.m. And I don't know what's going on. There's like I might be wrong in saying it's a flea market, which would have been on the east side of 120, I'm sorry, the west side of 122. And as we were approaching it and going through there, I said, I'm sure glad we got here when we did, because the traffic coming from the south, there were people trying to turn left across 122 and to get into this place. I don't know, it's got some kind of name, Junk, something or other.
Joyous Junk.
Yeah.
Yep.
Anyway, got to call it something, right? Anyway, the thing that wasn't really humorous was that people were trying to turn left, and the traffic was really backing up rapidly because the traffic coming from the north, you know, and there was a lot of it. In fact, we were in heavy traffic all the way through Franklin County until we got down to that wonderful roundabout at Hardy Road. But it really concerned me because folks trying to get across, and then there were folks going into Joyous Junk, and the traffic was stopped all the way out to 122, and so nobody could enter, and people were stopped trying to get in. It was a real mess.
Every year.
A mess.
I was in it.
Something's got to be done.
Any other questions before we have the
Well,
public
not a
hearing?
question, but just to talk, I mean, he's talking about the Hardy Road 122, and I mean, I'm not for or against it, but I do know that there was a fatality there about a year before they put that in, and it seems to have helped.
Thank you, Mickey. I like to drive fast.
Any other questions before we open up the public hearing? All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Eric.
Thank you, Eric.
Okay, so I have several people signed up to speak on any number of those 4 projects. I'm just going to call you up in the order that you handed me your papers. If you could state your name and your address or your voting district for the record. And then once you finish that, your 3 minutes would start. And then we will go from there. So the first one I have is Marson K.
My name's Marson Kay. I live at 2255 Big Island Highway, voting district number 7. My concerns is that this project will take some of our front of our yard out. And looking at the prints, we couldn't tell really, or the video or the slide, how much they are taking out, to what point. And there's some concern about also with my neighbors on their land that's going to be taken. And so we needed a little bit more clarity on that. And it would have devaluate our property in that sense. Is that taken in consideration? Also, you know, we bought the property because we had a big frontage for the view of our house and the view being away from the highway. Now the highway is going to be closer to our house, so that's one of our concerns. And it may affect our septic system, because my septic system's in the front yard. I know one of my neighbors, or both my neighbors, their septic system's in the front yard. So our concern is that, you know, what effect it's going to have on that, and also in the future, and what cost. So that's all I have.
Okay, thank you. Which particular project is it? Is it Centerville?
Yeah. 122 North Centerville.
122 Fancy Farm. Thank you. All right. Next up, I have George J. Davis Jr. And it would be helpful if you'd referenced for us which particular one that
Okay.
you talk about.
George J. Davis Jr., 2225 Big Island Highway. I am speaking on Centerville Fancy Farm Road scale plan. Again, most of us who live in that section between Liberty High School and 644 Centerville Road have some concerns about our property. My property is right next to Liberty High School, and it's the smallest lot of the three that are contained in that section. And I can't remember how many years ago, but it was at least 5 or 6 years ago, there was a widening project that widened out the road to 3 lanes directly in front of my driveway. So there are turning lanes because they wanted a turn lane to turn into the driveway there at Liberty High School. So in looking at the new plan going forward, they want to come back and take more property off the front of our home, which is going to put us in a precarious position. One, when the house was built in 1950, there was not enough property to satisfy the county's ordinance for acreage and road frontage. So additional strip of land had to be purchased from the family's in-laws next door so the permit could go forward and they could build a house on that property. My concern is in 2004, we had a new septic field put in the front yard. And at that time, it was told to me by the engineer that if it failed again and a repair had to be made, we would just have enough property there to accomplish that one more time. And I don't know if the regulations for setbacks for septic fields and drainage fields have changed since 2004. But if you take, and Eric told me it was about 18 feet, they want to move that roadway. That's going to go into that bank, and I may not have a piece of property that I can even sell if they do that. And I've lived in Bedford, I've lived here for 37 years. And it looks to me like the road right there in front of our house should be wide enough because we get in that center lane to turn in our driveway at times. It's not marked for that. You've got those hash marks there, but it's certainly wide enough for 3 lanes of traffic. So I don't know why you want to take more and move the right-of-way back even further when 7 or 8 years ago they widened the road there at that point anyway. So I would like just to say that I'd like for that plan to be reviewed.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Davis.
Thank you.
Next up, I have Neil Went.
Good evening. My name is Neil Went. I live at 5008 Forest Road. I'm talking about the Forest Road, Centerville Road, turn lane project. I would like to voice my opposition to it. I grew up at 5008 Forest Road right there. 5 years ago, my wife and kids were T-boned at that intersection when somebody ran a stop sign coming from Centerville Road onto Forest Road. I know how dangerous it is. There are constantly accidents there. They're not left turn lane accidents. People aren't getting rear-ended because they're turning left. People are getting T-boned because people are running the stop signs, especially from Centerville Road, but also from Timber Ridge Road. So there are 3 issues here. One, the visibility. The grass is constantly hanging out into the roadway from the right-of-way because it's only maintained when all the rest of the right-of-ways are mowed. And that's especially a problem coming from Timber Ridge. You gotta guess whether or not somebody's coming if you're turning left from Timber Ridge, which is not where the expansion's gonna happen, or to Forest Road. It's like people don't know that, people, especially people not familiar with the area, are constantly running that stop sign from Centerville Road onto Forest Road. And, you know, the flashing lights are on Forest Road. They were put up 10, 15 years ago. There's no flashing light on Centerville Road. There's no rumble strips. Maybe a speed bump would slow it down. Maybe they should reduce the speed limit coming up to that intersection. But for whatever reason, people run that stoplight and then this happens, right? And putting left turn lanes on Forest Road isn't gonna solve that problem. The third problem is speed. People going the speed limit come up quickly, all right, on Forest Road. Adding turn lanes is only gonna allow people to go faster. But when people are going 70 or 80 miles an hour, then it's a real problem, and that happens all the time. My office just down the road, I sit out there, I can't believe how fast people plow down that road. And there's very little speed enforcement. Some of that, I think, is because it's difficult to pull somebody over on Forest Road. But there's more speed enforcement, reducing the speed limits. This is not gonna increase the throughput. It is gonna allow people to go faster down Forest Road. It's not gonna reduce the visibility problems, and it's not gonna increase the amount of people who are stopping at the stop signs. For those reasons, I strongly oppose. And I wanna say my neighbor, Mr. Stanley's here, and he's not gonna have a yard. His house will be unusable if this goes through, because it's gonna be paved right up to his front door. Thank you.
Neil. All right, and I believe Mr. Stanley is next.
David D. Stanley, 5185 Forest Road. They put that turning lane, I can't get in my driveway. It's gonna cause more wrecks.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Stanley. Next up, I have Gary Flint.
Gary Flint, 5301 Forest Road. We talked the same intersection these two gentlemen spoke about, Timber Ridge and Centerville. The first gentleman that spoke on that, I completely agree. My concern is the Timber Ridge, Centerville roads. I've almost been T-boned there. Someone just come, luckily, I was turning left onto Timber Ridge, and luckily, they were looking at their phone the whole time they went right across the intersection. And I just wasn't close enough to get hit yet. I had stopped to turn, so it was just, things worked out for me there. But, you know, the rumble strips before you get there, if that person would have been looking at their phone and saw the hit the thing, constantly, because that is a dangerous intersection. I hear booms all the time from my house. And I can look out and, fire and rescue and everybody's there. So it is a very dangerous intersection. But I agree, I don't see any need to have a turn lane. I would like to see the speed reduced there, even to 35. It's 55 through there. It can gradually come down and then gradually pick back up. But the blinking lights aren't working on 221 to let them know there's a busy intersection. Those just don't work. People are still going through. So there is a right turn lane to turn on Centerville, but I think the biggest problem is your Centerville and Timber Ridge, people crossing that without stopping. And if they do stop, they don't stay there very long. But I think just some education on those, lower speed limits, rumble strips, they got a blink and flash and stop sign on Timber Ridge now. I think it lights up, I believe. But, and that bank, I hadn't thought about that, but that bank is kind of in the way. There's a Verizon thing there and everything. I'm not sure if you can move it, but, having it maintained would be helpful as well. But just considering other things before we take large amount of property. It's not gonna affect me as much as it's gonna affect my neighbor. My neighbors are gonna get it worse than I will. I don't want it to happen to my yard as well, but, other people will be affected a little more than me. But I think that we're not hitting a big portion of that. Even if we put the turn lanes in, Timber Ridge or Centerville are still a big issue there. Thank you for your time.
All right, thank you. Next, I have Gary Vertican.
Actually, can we get the one slide about the roundabout put up? Is that possible? My name is Gary Vertican. I live at 1023 Azalea Drive, which is right here on that screen with the, that you see the house up in the upper right-hand corner of that roundabout. Now, seeing the second concept for this area, I definitely like a lot better. I definitely see its advantage. I have my window, my office, I face that area, that stretch of 122. And I sit there for pretty much 8 hours a day watching traffic go by. I see the deliveries that go into Webster. I don't know if any of the Webster Marine people are here, but they are probably going to have the biggest issues with this than I would. One, it does take up my land. One, it does take up all the mailboxes for our street. Those would all have to be moved. But the biggest thing I see about the problem with this, and why the roundabout is not a good idea, is just, the constant, people speed in and out. The one over on the Franklin side, been there, been through it. I understand the concept and the safety and things like that, but there's like hardly any houses around there, and they're set way back for the one that's kind of in that area. Then you have a gas station there, and people do slow down, but you see them accelerating, out of that circle pretty quick. And the thing is that increases more exhaust. My family, I have 2 children. They get to breathe that then. So the roundabout idea is definitely, I would rather not see that idea, but the turn lanes would be great. One, it'd also facilitate for both marinas, the Magnum Marina and the Webster Marine, because they have huge semis delivering boats that people try to get around or anything like that, but they turn to go in there. They have to even swing a little bit wide, in order to make those turns. So the concept of having a middle lane, that would be great. And actually, I think the roundabout would be good up where Mr. Davis is saying on that Joyous Junk place. That area, from that point down to just past where Halesford Harbor place is, that area is heavy in traffic and lots of accidents there. Get people slowing down at that point, especially if we're going to have big RVs and a campground that's going to eventually go in there. There should be a widening of that whole stretch. Get the people to slow down before they start coming down that hill. That would probably reduce a lot more than what this roundabout would do here. But a middle lane, going all the way from Halesford Bridge all the way up to the Catholic Church would be recommended. It would just give you, there's a lot of places there that could use the left-hand turn lane. Halesford, the gas stations and places like that. It just would be more convenient for everybody to have that turn lane. Again, big boats, RVs, things like that, bringing stuff in and out of both marinas could facilitate, having that middle lane. The roundabout, I understand the concept, put it further up the road is all I ask. Don't take up my property. Appreciate it, thank you.
Thank you, Gary.
Oh, one last thing, there is an extra piece of land between me and that spot that I don't know if anybody's aware of. And it would take up someone else's land that I don't think know about this.
Next, I have Tom McClanahan.
My name's Tom McClanahan. I live 2257 Big Island Highway. I'm right on the corner of Big Island and Centerville. We've been there about 4 years and have witnessed several accidents right there. Most of the accidents are occurring from people coming off of Fancy Farm Road and off of Centerville Road, trying to get either across or make turns onto 122. I don't know if there's been a traffic study done on that area. If not, there needs to be one done, because most of your accidents are occurring right there. Traffic flies by there. They need to somehow or another, like they was talking about on, over there on Forest Road, we need to slow that traffic down on 122. You're coming right into a school zone, and or you're leaving the school zone, and people just, they lay on it right there. I've got a driveway that comes in off of Centerville Road. It's gonna have to be relocated. And again, I've got the same problem that Mr. Davis has with septic lines out there in the front. Taking 18 foot's gonna take out one of my lines. There's utilities are all on the Centerville side of 122. Matter of fact, Verizon is getting ready to put in fiber optic lines right down through there. I don't know whether that's ever been taken into consideration either. But there's a whole lot of things that need to be studied before that project is passed. And again, my questions are this, how are we gonna take care of the land being taken? Is it gonna be paid for? Is it gonna be, we gonna have any kind of compensation for driveways or for septic systems? And, there's a lot of utility relocations that's gonna be involved in there too. So, thank you.
Thank you. It's the last one I had signed up. Is it anyone else that wants to speak during the public comments time on any of the other projects that did not get an opportunity to sign up? Yes, ma'am.
I would like to.
Okay.
Carol Gramling, I live on Moneta Road, 15680 Moneta Road. It's not going to affect my property, but the house next door to me is my mom's, and it will affect her. On this roundabout, I think it's the stupidest thing I ever heard of. On the one on the Franklin County side, if it had been made bigger, it may be better, because the tractor trailers can't even get around it. You go around it with your RV, you can't even go around it without getting up on the side of it, but that's neither here nor there for that one. But this 122, I have lived there all my life. And it is too much traffic for the road. There's not enough law enforcement to keep the speeding down. There is definitely something needs to be done, but this roundabout is not gonna fix it. The turning lanes are gonna help, but again, they may help with the speeding. It's just too much traffic for the road. I don't know what the answer is, but I don't think the roundabout's gonna do anything. Not gonna slow anybody down. I mean, the speed limit's 45. I'd like to see who does 45 through there. Nobody. Nobody. Thank you.
Thank you, Carol.
Thank you, Carol.
Anyone else? All right. Yeah. Yes, sir.
Gary Worthen. I live on Moneta Road also for that project. My biggest question, and it's just questions, I live across from Vinnie's, and I hear brakes all the time. I mean, I think it's a great idea somehow, because, mostly during this season, people aren't used to it. But my question is, and maybe it's a simple answer, but like all the houses that are on the lakeside, it just seems like, I don't know how that's gonna work with turning lanes, because, if your house is in between, it's almost head on to turn into your home. Does that make sense? You know, like if you're coming from Bedford and, you know, you go to turn, it just seems like there'd be a car. Maybe I'm all screwed up, but.
Be two
Yeah,
people
because
making
there's-
left at the same time.
Yeah, and that's my only question. I think it's a great idea. It's the speed's terrible. I hear brakes. I've seen the accidents. That's mostly it. And I can't tell whose land is being affected by the maps. I'm not sure if it's both sides. Do you know that or?
So for that project, we believe most of it can fit within that existing right of
That's,
way.
yeah, I
So
couldn't
what
see any,
that impact is
but
outside of the roundabout.
yeah, and so things like that. I see a lot of positives. I'm just wondering what that could cause, you know, because there's like, I don't know, 10 or 12 houses there. Anyway.
I see your point. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Yes, sir.
John Pace, 2276 Big Island Highway, and this is the Centerville in 122. The problem with that intersection has nothing to do with rear-end accidents. The problem with that intersection has to do with visibility coming off Centerville Road onto 122. I've seen it happen personally at least 5 times. 2 vehicles will pull up and there's a right-hand turn onto 122. And the law of the land is first person to the stop gets to go, and the other person doesn't impede the visibility of the other person pulling up to that stop sign. And we have numerous times pulled up, and someone will pull up exactly beside us, blocking the visibility. And I've watched it happen in real time, where someone will block the visibility, someone will get impatient, pull out because they can't see what's coming, and the car is T-boned and driven into my neighbor's corner property. And I don't know if he's here today, but he's had to repair his fence at least 5 or 6 times because they was driven in, and that's how it always happens at that point. And a turn lane and widening that road is only gonna make the traffic go faster where they're already way too fast. That's the problem with that intersection. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Anyone else before I close the public hearing part? All right, I'll close down the public hearing now. Do we have an action that we need to take tonight? I didn't think so.
Work session
Yeah.
at our next meeting, is that correct?
Yeah, the thought was is to take the public comments under consideration this evening. Staff may do some, I know Eric's been taking copious notes, and have a discussion about maybe some of the findings of the concerns expressed by the citizens this evening. Talk with the Board of Supervisors about that the next work session, and then from there decide what projects you want to put forward into the Smart Scale grant round, if any.
Any further comments from anybody on the board before we move on from this section?
Mr. Chair, I'll say, I really appreciate the comments, especially the ones Fancy Farms, Centerville intersection, and then the Centerville Timber Ridge Road. I travel that way all the time, and you are 100% right. It is the stopping at the stop sign, the last gentleman that spoke, the edging up to try to get, that is exactly what the problem is. I hadn't thought about it until you spoke tonight, and that's why it's so important to come out and speak at these public hearings, because it does give you a clear perspective. I travel those 2 intersections several times a week, and you are exactly right. I don't see where widening the road and putting the turn lanes will help the problem, because I've seen that poor couple's fence, that white fence, get bashed into so many times, and I just think, how in the world can this happen? But I appreciate you coming out and and saying what you said tonight.
Right. That moves us on to our first action item, which is consideration of a resolution adopting and appropriating the fiscal year 2024-2025 Bedford County and Bedford County School Board budgets. That's Resolution R 061024-04. Mr. Hiss.
All right. I'm pinch hitting this evening for our finance director who's out of town, so bear with me. From the public hearing at the last board meeting on May 28th, there was only a couple changes. We did have, from our budget work session and our budget public hearing, there was a discussion about changing the allocation to the public school system. So after conferring with school system staff, the final value of additional state funding that's being received over and above what the school board had previously budgeted was $1,089,650. So what is reflected in the budget being shown this evening is a reduction of local funding in that same amount to the school system, which let me get to that, which gets to a final allocation to the school system of local funding of $33,603,378, which is, like I said, $1,089,650 less than what was originally proposed. So that was one change that is reflected in the document that was from our last budget work session and the public hearing. The other change from our last budget discussion was the change in the reclassification from an existing project management business analyst position and the information technology position to a full-time administrative assistant. So what's changed in the budget is keeping that position the same as that full-time project manager business analyst, and not reclassifying that position to the administrative assistant. So that's what's reflected in the budget this evening. Really, the agenda item is about the same as what you saw during the budget public hearings. I really don't feel it's appropriate or necessary for me to rehash all that information. I will say, along with the general fund budget, which is a little bit over $130 million, there's also other budgets and other funds that are a part of this, including a $870,000 vehicle replacement fund, at $884,000. Grant budget fund of $870,000, a vehicle replacement fund of $884,000, law library fund of $11,125. The capital improvement fund is $42,846,864. Nursing home fund budget is $8.875 million, and the solid waste budget is $5.5 million. Going on to a little bit more about the school budget. In addition to the local, just for public information, in addition to the local contribution just for operations, there are additional contributions made by the county government over and above that $33 million. So the county this year is also putting in $3 million to go from our new growth of our tax digest into the maintenance contingency reserve budget, which is essentially to help with that reversion cliff that will be coming in the next 4 years from now. So that's as part of an ongoing plan in order to do that, but that's an additional $3 million. Also, I think something that's often overlooked is the amount of debt service that the county can pays every year for the school, school projects, enhancement, renovations to school buildings and so forth. So the debt service payment that the county is contributing for school debt service is a little bit over $7.4 million this year. So that is a considerable amount. So, with a 7.4 and a $3 million, you're looking at over a $43 million budget from the county funds to the school system. Anyways, that's really the main items of the budget. I know at the last budget work session, there was some discussion about whether that the $1 million being proposed to be reduced from the school budget, about earmarking that for a certain purpose. There was some discussion about putting that into some fire and EMS purposes, but that was just our discussion at the last work session. It doesn't have to be earmarked. It can be, or it can be utilized for something different. That was just a discussion that was had. And that's but anyways, that can be amended as needed. So I think that's all I have for my comments this evening.
Okay, any questions for Robert? All right, well, I'll open it up for discussion here from the board.
I would, Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I would just like to publicly remind everyone here this evening that in a presentation done by Mr. Robertson some time back in a meeting here, that he showed to folks here present that we could cut the cost of one project, specifically speaking, the awnings project at Liberty High School, by 2/3. And we'd done some diligence on that project. And I found it disheartening in a meeting with some banter between Mr. Hagler and Mr. Hill in the school board, where they said they could do whatever they wanted to, is pretty much the way I took it, and wouldn't need to listen to the committee. And if I had been speaking in that meeting in Mr. Hill's seat, I would have publicly said, we're really appreciative for this committee and the efforts of Mr. Robertson and those who participated in the efforts to show how we could cut just 2/3 out of the spending in the awnings project. Because the way I look at this, if we could cut 2/3 out of one project in this proposed $28.6 million project, how much more could be cut from the rest of that project? And I would like to have heard Mr. Hill publicly say, I'm looking forward to working with this committee, with Mr. Davis, Mr. Scott, Mr. Robertson, and 2 members of the school board, and finding ways we can reduce the expenses, the budget on the project between Stanton River and Liberty High School. And I want to say that, make that known.
I'm going to just, some comments of mine, as I have some significant reservations regarding clawing back that $1 million plus that they've been allocated. However, I will say that I would fully support if it went into that contingency, maintenance contingency fund. They have a list of well over $100 million of capital improvements that need to be made. In fact, this amount would almost cover what we found out would be necessary for Stewartsville to be brought up to speed. So I personally I have reservations about moving that outside of the school budget, but I would like to see it go towards the maintenance contingency.
Are we allowed to do that?
You can allocate within those 6 pots of the school board budget. You just can't allocate specifically how they spend it.
Then I'm in support of it.
Mr. Chair, I agree with what you just said. I'd like to see the $1 million go from operations to the maintenance contingency, still keeping it within the scope of the school, but then that gets them ahead in the maintenance area without penalizing anything that they're going to be at a shortfall anyway at the end of, I think it's 4 more years. And then that keeps it, what you don't want to do is build your operations at this point. That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to soften that cliff. So not putting any into operations, but putting it back towards your maintenance contingency. So I support moving that $1 million to the maintenance.
Any other comments, discussion?
Mr. Chair, I'd like to say I would go along with Ms. Parker on that.
I was hoping to have it for fire and rescue, because I think we have some needs. We're putting $3 million into their capital improvements. We have capital improvements in fire and rescue that are dire. I talked to someone yesterday who, their insurance has gone way up because we closed down one of our sites where we had fire trucks before. We don't now. We're building in that area, still closed down the New London station, and we have some real needs. And I know they have needs too, but I think we're giving $3 billion to capital improvements, 7.4 to their debt service. We've helped the schools a lot. I think it's time to put some more attention in our fire and rescue needs.
I don't disagree with that at all, but I do feel we're going to have a significant surplus at the end of this fiscal year that certainly once we close the books out, there'd be funds available, because I fully support that fire and EMS need some attention.
Serious attention, much even more than this one. And this is money that the state has given additional. They had it this budget. They said, yeah, this budget will work. And we supported it, right? Now we have this extra money that's coming in from the state. I think that's where it should go.
Mr. Chair, I agree with Ms. Bainsley that money was extra and the budget had already been set, which they said was enough. Plus, we know the needs of the fire and rescue. Plus, Mr. Davis has pointed out on several occasions significant savings in the construction that would more than make up for the $1 million we're pulling out. So if things were looked into, like Ms. Davis said, they have savings there, that would more than make up for the $1 million that we're talking about keeping over there. But I thought from overnight when we discussed this, it was pretty well determined that we needed to pull it out and use it for the fire and rescue.
Any other comments, discussion?
I got 2 kids, both starving, and 1 sandwich. It's who gonna feed?
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I see the merits of both. Yeah, we have serious fire and rescue needs. The cost of equipment for these departments has gone up tremendously under this current administration, just like everything else. And it's a tremendous burden that these organizations can't absorb. So that it is unfortunate that the Democrats in the General Assembly didn't have that on their radar, but they probably don't want to recognize that inflation exists right now. We all know it exists, but they don't want to recognize it. But I also see the merit in getting us further along towards being able to have enough allocated in maintenance so that when we get to that fiscal cliff where the reversion dollars go away, we won't negatively affect operations for the school system. Because we certainly could not afford a huge drop-off in revenue if it was all tied up in operations. And so this has been the vehicle to get that done. And due to the changes to the LCI, that seems to continue to be a moving target. And as I understand it, there were new adjustments to the LCI due to the way they're calculating it now. And currently, it's fixed for Bedford County, but we're gonna get the natural number in just a few years, and we're all gonna have to eat it, wherever that falls. And I'm concerned about the way that target keeps moving away from us. So I can see the merit of doing this as well. So as long as we can prioritize any additional funds, because I don't want to wait till next year to address the shortfall that we're seeing with respect to fire and rescue apparatus. I don't think we can afford to wait till next year. I think we need to address that this year. So as long as we can prioritize that, as soon as we know how much money we have available to inject some funds into that, then I will go along with allocating this specifically, this $1,089,650 to the maintenance contingency reserve. It essentially moves us up another million. As it appeared before the target moved, we were going to roughly come up $2 million short. And I think the school system has been trying to close that gap, and this will help us also close that gap to where by the time we get to that point, I think we'll be able to continue to come in for a soft landing, and it won't negatively affect the school system's operations. So for the long-term health of the school system, I will go along with it.
Mr. Chairman, I'm struck here by the difference, choices we have. In one area, we know where the funds are going to go. In the other, it's a matter of trust.
Any other discussion?
Yeah, that's a really good point. Well, Mr. Chair, I'm just, it just seems like fire and rescue keeps on being pushed aside. And we, as a board, need to make up our mind that we are going to make it a priority. And I will, vote for these extra funds to go into the school. There are extra funds that the state appropriated. But I just urge everyone on this board to really get serious, and if we have to, whatever we have to do to make cuts in other areas, let's get serious that we are going to support fire and rescue in this county.
And to be clear, Mr. Chair, this money, it's going into the maintenance fund. It's in the maintenance fund. It doesn't go back into operations.
That would be correct.
Because I felt like we achieved a very, in my opinion, strong victory for folks in Bedford County, particularly those in the Liberty, Stanton River District and Stewartsville, because, most of us on this board, I think, were shocked by the $21 million figure that was loosely thrown out that it was going to take to renovate or upgrade Stewartsville Elementary, and they had to close it and move fifth graders in with eighth graders and eighth graders in with seniors. And when we were able to show factually that school could be updated and made right for less than $2 million. And I think we all need to remember these things and hold these folks accountable. And I expect no less of us here either.
Mr. Chair, can I just clarify, what I'm hearing is on the resolution that's proposed, the language says that the Board of Supervisors does hereby adopt and appropriate the FY 24-25 Bedford County School Board budget as follows. And there's 4 categories. One is a school operating fund for $120 million and change, school nutrition fund for $5 million and change, school textbook fund for a little bit over $1 million, and then the maintenance contingency reserve is 4.4. So what I'm hearing the discussion would be to increase the maintenance contingency reserve to the $5,486,000.
Yes.
So So anyways, to Mr. Davis's point, that money would be appropriated into that maintenance contingency reserve, so it stays there.
All right, we'd entertain a motion for action on our budget for 2024-25.
I'll make a motion to approve the budget as we presented it tonight.
I have a motion from Mr. Sharp to approve Resolution R061024-04 as discussed in this session. Is there a second?
Second.
Second from Mr. Davis. This is a roll call vote. Mr. Davis?
Yes.
Mr. Scott?
Yes.
Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Ms. Bansley?
Yes.
Mr. Sharp?
Yes.
Ms. Parker?
Yes.
Chair votes yes, motion passes.
I thought he was gonna skip you.
Next up, we have consideration of a resolution granting permission for the placement of a new Vietnam War Memorial on the courthouse grounds. That's Resolution R061024-05. And Mr. Johnson and Mr. Stouter? Mr. Johnson.
All right. Bear with me a second. It was the 60s and Bedford was hot. Rock and roll was big and Bedford Lake was the spot. Weekends would find the teenagers all there, guys flexing their muscles, girls brushing their hair. A battle across the globe in another land, the invasion was starting band by band. The Beatles and the Rolling Stones were part of the charge. It wouldn't be long until they loomed quite large. Another battle brewed, Southeast Asia the place, the North against the South, the U.S. set up a base. Most folks never heard of a place called Vietnam. Didn't care what happened there, didn't give a damn. Cambodia was hot, no business there, that's just my opinion. We didn't have a prayer. Battle of Darang Valley was in 65, the 1st Cav Division I, LBJ revived. Quezon was later in 68, the Tet Offensive was brutal, it opened a floodgate. We wasted lives taking Hamburger Hill. Those men ordered to withdraw, they died for nil. Roger Goff from Big Island was Bedford's first loss, then Alfred Robinson, he's the next to cross. Michael Moorman from Thaxton died there next. Then Tucker Oliver, Bedford feeling the effects. My teacher's husband from Manita, Elmer Nance. George Davis from in town, he didn't have a chance. Medic Lonnie Parker, one of Taylor's Mountain's finest. Eddie Daniels joined his brother as they laid him to rest. Kenny Fink died back home from wounds he received. The infection was too much, his family grieved. Montville's Wayne Garrett and Alan Tyler too. 69 was hard on the community, losing these two. John Samuel Myers, another Manita young man, Bronze Star with Valor for taking a stand. Maybe we should thank them and remember their sorrow. For these young men from Bedford, there is no tomorrow. Folks, we just finished recognizing the Bedford Boys Tribute Center. We had Memorial Day services up at the D-Day Memorial a couple of weeks ago, and then we finished up this past weekend with the 80th anniversary of D-Day, and it was a wonderful celebration. It was a wonderful way to honor those that gave their lives at D-Day and in World War II overall. Folks, it's time Bedford stepped up and recognized the men that we lost in Vietnam. There's a plaque over at the courthouse at the bottom behind the flag that lists the casualties of World War I, World War II, Korea, and Vietnam, and it's erroneous. It's not accurate at all on the Vietnam portion. I can't speak for the rest of it. But for 17 years, my journey with this initiative started 17 years ago, talking to the families of the people who got killed in Vietnam and promising them that I wouldn't stop until we finally got something in Bedford recognized. And I'm here just begging tonight for this board to allow us to put something in front of the courthouse over there, something about 5 foot by 5 foot, 6 foot tall. It's much like a tombstone, or it's produced by the people that make the tombstones. We've got a couple of options. It's no cost to the county. DW, I've talked with him, and the upkeep on it's no more than what we already have there now. And it's just it's a small damn price to pay for what they paid for us. And while talking about it, I'd like to recognize We've got Lonnie Parker's sister in the audience. Karen, thank you so much for coming. That's all I got.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Mickey, did you write that poem?
Yep.
That was tremendous.
Thank you.
I would like to get a copy, because I want to talk to my son-in-law and see if he can write some music and
That'd be awesome.
do a song.
Great.
I would heartily support, as a kid myself, Tommy, I know you did too. I didn't go to Vietnam. I graduated from high school in 74 that is. And I've read a book by a local author, John Ketwig, and it is an extremely eye-opening book about the Vietnam, an infantryman's experience in Nam. A hard rain fell. Anyone who reads it, it's a tough book to read, but it really, really will open your eyes to what our men endured in Vietnam. And
I have an uncle that served, that's still alive today, and lives in Bedford County, and yeah, I'd love to see this happen, so I'm going to wholeheartedly support.
Any other discussion here from the board?
I'd like to ask Mickey to make the motion.
Make a motion, brother.
Mr. Chair, I make a motion to approve resolution R061024-05.
Do I have a second?
second,
Second from Mr. Davis. This is a roll call. Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Ms. Bansley?
Yes.
Mr. Sharp? Mr. Davis?
yes.
Mr. Scott?
Yes.
Ms. Parker?
Yes.
Chair votes yes. Thank you, gentlemen, for your service. All right, that moves us on to board committee reports. There was a copy of the Personnel Committee minutes in your packet. And to board comments now. Anything anybody needs to share this evening? Be hard to after that.
On that same note, I'd tell you, this past 2 weeks just made me so proud to be from Bedford County. You know, with everything that was going on patriotic-wise between Memorial Day and the 80th celebration, it was just wonderful and just made me proud to be from Bedford.
I would I mentioned a little bit at dinner, I'm gonna bring it up again. I was impressed by the event I attended this weekend in Patrick County at the Wayside Park. My wife and I enjoy beach music, and especially the Band of Oz. And we drove all the way down there, and I didn't know what to expect, but I really, really think that it would be I think Bedford County has somewhere similar to this Wayside Park. Perhaps it's the park off of Independence, where we could do certain things such as this and bring folks into Bedford. I know a lot of time and thought is put into bringing business to our county. And it occurred to me as I was driving home, what a great time my wife and I had here for the whole day. I think we need to think a little bit more about, we have such a great recreational opportunities here. And to have a venue such as that, I'm sure we already have real estate that we could use. Not to be picking at that woman who said people drive so fast, but I'll tell you what, I about lost my mind going through from the time I got to Manita until we got down to Hardy Road, people driving so darn slow. It was just all I could do to sit there without exploding. But anyway.
Anybody else have anything they'd like to share? All right, then we'll move along to County Administrator.
Yeah, I'll just echo what Supervisor Johnson just said about the ceremonies that have occurred in Bedford County and the good local, regional, and national publicity that our locality has received as a result of the quality of quality of events that have been put on and the sanctity that's been shown thereof for those events have been received well. Also want to just, thank our county staff for the work that they did, particularly with the D-Day ceremony, tourism department, economic development, and PIO all worked hard to keep the community informed, in addition to, other media outlets about what was happening and so forth. And then, of course, the sheriff's office, fire and EMS, and emergency management staff were all integral as part of the planning for the public safety of that event and just helping with crowd control and other types of logistics that were needed from a safety perspective. So always appreciate the hard work of our county staff to help make sure that these events go well planned. So that's all I had, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chair,
Yes,
I thought we had some appointments.
we do. They're next up. Next up, we've got some appointments to do. My computer is all frozen up, and I don't have anybody's names.
Start if you want.
Okay, so the first up we have is someone for the Local Board of Building Code Appeals.
We only have one.
David Rouse, R-O-W-S-E.
Roust.
It looks like Rouse.
All right.
I'll make a motion that we appoint David Rouse, however it's spelled, to the Local Board of Building Code Appeals.
Okay. This is to fill an unexpired term that begins immediately and ends January 31st, 2026. Is there a second?
Second.
Second from Mr. Scott. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. Question on the library board. It's a total of 3 appointments, correct? There's one. One's a reappoint and 2. Okay, all right. We only had 2 slots on the paper, so we'll make sure. All right, so then we have Shireen Duncombe, who filled an unexpired term, and this would be for a full term beginning July 1st, 2024 to the end of June 30th, 2028. And I believe I made the motion last time to put her on, so I'll make a motion that we reappoint her for that term.
Second.
Second from Ms. Parker. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? That one passes. Now we got 2 more slots.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I would move that we appoint Jen Lazowski to, as an at-large member of the Library Board of Trustees. The term will begin on July 1, 2024, and end on June 30th, 2028.
Second.
Okay, so I have a motion from Ms. Bansley, seconded by Mr. Scott. Jen L.
Lazowski, Lazowski.
Right. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion passes. And the second person.
Mr. Chair, let me pull this up so I can read it. All right, I can't find it, but anyway, I would like to appoint Heather Craver, am I saying the name correctly, for the other vacant position for the library.
Okay, I have a motion from Ms. Parker to appoint Heather Craver. Is there a second?
Second.
Second from Mr. Scott. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. We welcome those folks to service into the county. Mr. Skelly.
Nothing at this time, Mr. Chair.
Nothing for you. Board information, you've got the BRWA meeting minutes from April 16th, 2024 in your packet. Mr. Hiss, upcoming meetings.
Yeah, we'll have next meeting is June 24th at 5 PM is a work session, and a regular meeting at 7 o'clock. And just a note, just to remind everybody that we will only have one meeting in July, and that'll be on July 22nd. So,
All right.
Make a motion.
Scott, is there anything you want to lead us in?
Make a motion, we adjourn.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second from Ms. Parker. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? Nobody? We are adjourned.